Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George Affleck.
And it's time for...
UnSpun! You blinded me with science!
Excellent. Now that earworm's going to be in my head for the rest of the day, but I know why you took us there.
Thomas Dolby there for
Yes.
you, I think, right?
Yes.
Yes, science. Science.
Very important, this science.
I like science. I'm not very good at it, but
that's why you talk to experts or listen to experts.
That's right. You've been talking a lot in your other little gig there with NW.
Can I start there?
Yes.
Because I really think that people... Because obviously you're following George...
_
Affleck, and you are following UnSpun podcast on Twitter, at Jody Vance. But there's somebody else that you need to follow, especially in this time of COVID-19 or coronavirus. His name is Peter Hotez, Dr. Peter Hotez, or Professor Peter J. Hotez, if you want to Google him. And you should Google him.
H-O-T-E-S?
H-O-T-E-Z.
Z.
Or Z, if you're watching in the United States. But I've been interviewing Dr. Hotez for just over, I'd say, about 2 years, maybe a little bit longer. And it started because I was fascinated by the anti-vax movement, and I wanted to speak with an expert, and he's actually a vaccinologist. He's a pediatrician and a professor. He's the dean at Baylor School of Medicine. He went to Harvard, Yale. Like, need he say more? This guy?
Science.
Science, but he can break things down and explain them in layman's terms. So I highly recommend that you follow him and listen to some of his work. He's written tons. His adult daughter, has autism. Okay. And he's written a book called No.
That's the vaxxer
No,
situation.
Vaccines Did Not Cause Rachel's Autism is the name of the book he wrote about his adult daughter with autism. Anyway.
And right now, we need a vaccine.
We need a vaccine, and he was part of the team that developed the SARS vaccine. He has followed SARS and MERS and swine flu, H1N1. Like, he's done this before, and he explained the coronavirus in very simple terms and has sort of updated me while doing the radio. Each time I hit him up on Twitter, sorry I'm long-winded on this, but it's a really important piece of the puzzle, is that for weeks now he has been updating on what's been happening in China, what they're trying to do in China, how not knowing a lot about the virus, but seeing the Chinese government build a hospital in 10 days for 1,000 people kind of speaks to the urgency of it in that country. And
so we're thinking back then, they're containing it.
Contain it.
We're thinking things aren't going to, maybe won't get worse, but then are they getting worse from this guy's point of view?
He always said it will travel. It's how it is managed until such a time that you can genetically identify this virus, which they have, then get live virus so that they can work on a vaccine to try and get live virus actually into a lab, and then try the SARS vaccine and see if it works.
That's like the craziest job I can't even imagine.
Right, so he's
why
brilliant.
Why would you apply for that job?
I don't know. It takes a special kind of person to do these things. But at the end of the day, he has been saying things like, obviously wash your hands. If you are sick, self-quarantine. And I mean, like, don't go to work, don't go to school, don't even. If you feel even remote, by the time you feel sick.
No matter how sick, whatever your sickness, until you get checked out.
Remember when I came here sick and Amanda got sick right after?
And then I got sick.
And it was totally my fault. And I will not ever do it again, because it was really bad. Like, the two of us ended up with pneumonia, and not good. Not good. So we're looking at that on a bigger scale. He has managed the numbers with regard to coronavirus. Two important things. Number one, it's not proving to be as deadly as SARS.
Okay.
It is
But
more deadly
because we caught it early, or like we.
No, the instances of people needing care.
Okay.
Yeah, because SARS was attacking healthy young people. And coronavirus or COVID-19 is not.
The odd exception.
It's attacking, right, with the odd exception. And that's also scary. But it's not like SARS was just like wiping out everybody that pretty much came in contact with it if you couldn't get access to a respirator. So this is not SARS. It is scary, even when talking to a scientist, but it's not as scary as when you just read the headline in the newspaper that's telling you, like, it's coming.
Okay, but this is the problem. There's the virus, and then there's all the shit that goes on around the virus. And that's what's happening now. If yesterday, there were some CBC did a story about, I think it was northern Italy, shelves empty in all the stores. You are seeing a lot of sort of panic kind of stories starting. And when we talk about unspinning something, the spin right now is the media move to panic stations, and that's when you have to start worrying, because as a pandemic, and Australia has declared it last night as a pandemic in Australia, and the WHO has said it's only
it's a global health emergency,
not a pandemic yet.
Yet.
And what do you do when it's a pandemic? Well, that's questionable, because Australia says it's a pandemic, but we're not going to change anything.
Right.
So,
well, and that was my first question to you. It's like, well, there's the headline. I'm like, well, what do they mean by that exactly? Because typically speaking, and why shelves are emptying is when, like what we've seen in China, there is a pandemic impact in China.
Yeah, there's nobody on the streets.
There's nobody on the streets.
Yeah.
There's
and
nobody
I was
at work.
in Toronto in SARS for a conference. And I was there, and we'd rolled the dice, a few months before, because the sponsors were in place, and it was a client of mine, and we were doing the media relations for it. It was an environmental conference, and we were going there. We were going to do this. We went for it, but it didn't. The SARS just kept getting worse, and so we got there. We flew, and I didn't wear a mask, and because that's a myth, anyways. Nobody was there. Nobody was. Not only was nobody at the conference. My Molson's and Labatt's made beer free for the whole time I was there. So if you went out of your house,
that wasn't just for you.
Yeah,
that was for everybody, because I lived in Toronto during that.
For me. No, it was
it was all the bars, because they're like, it's over, guys, come back.
But it was kind of over, and of course. So
they had contained it.
So I was fairly hungover for several days of the conference because there was nobody there.
They had contained it.
They had contained it, and I think they had the vaccine by that point. I'm not sure.
They did. Another person you should follow is Ian Young of the South China Morning Post on Twitter. Remarkable insights from him, because he is so obviously hyper aware of the Chinese Canadian citizens and how they are consuming their news here. And he was posting video and photos on his Twitter of Aberdeen Mall in Richmond at 6:15 on a Saturday, which usually is just jammed with people, and it was absolutely empty. And this is a couple of weeks ago. I had him on CKNW with me, and we talked it through. I'm like, why is it so different? Like, there's no panic. People aren't avoiding. And he goes, they're getting their news from a very different source. WeChat. And the Chinese.
So what happens when you start getting your news and your information, and the virus is one thing and panic stations is another? And if people start, with northern Italy, where shelves are becoming empty, where we have the president of the United States saying there's not a problem, he's clearly trying to contain the panic potentially. Maybe that's what he's trying to do by.
Yeah, he wants the Dow to stop diving.
The Dow, but also going. What is leadership? Is he trying to be a leader by saying, "Don't worry, everybody, don't worry"? Maybe that's in his head. That's what works. And the alternative is Australia, where they're saying we're in a pandemic, and then people start going, let's just start hoarding food. Let's stop going out. Let's stop going to work. And that's kind of what when I was in Toronto. That's kind of what I saw.
Yeah.
You saw this, and you see that in China. So it's one of these things. Is like, and I don't think there's any controlling it. And if that's why the cure, the vaccine is such a crucial part of this, to get to that as soon as possible, because there's no controlling, I think, the chaos that could ensue. Especially
in a time where social media opens the floodgates to false information. That's why it takes us back to blinded you with science. Because sticking to the actual scientific piece, following Dr. Hotez, listening to what he is saying, because food insecurity in a pandemic is mostly about the 30 countries that are completely ill-prepared to manage this, to manage a very severe form of the flu, which is what this is. Coronavirus is a respiratory.
Some of those places you can't even get a message out.
Exactly. But if some people get sick and then it's exponentially more contagious than first thought, it can wipe out entire villages, and there's no medical attention or facility to help. And then there are people that are otherwise vulnerable on any given day left to fend for themselves with no food or water.
And I've seen,
so
Canada,
Bill Gates, not one of those.
Bill Gates has been spending a lot of time dealing with polio, I think, and measles and mumps in Africa, the main focus. And the challenge in the documentary I was watching, his biggest challenge with the Linda and Bill Gates Foundation is getting into those countries and educating these people about vaccination. And imagine if this becomes a pandemic in that level in those areas where they can't even communicate.
That's why containment is key.
You know, things that we have, vaccines for.
What I did get from Dr. Hotez is that it is due diligence and citizens following the protocol of washing hands and staying home. If you're sick, self-quarantine. If your symptoms are getting worse, call the doctor. Don't show up at the doctor's office. Actually phone the doctor and say, I have these symptoms. They'll tell you what to do. We do have facilities in Canada, as we learned during SARS, that can isolate patients who have symptoms. Right. You know, being fearful of what that might mean for you if you have symptoms. Trust that staying home and hiding that is way worse than going and getting medical attention. Those are the things I think that unspin this, is because you can see a lot of people trying to sort of manage the fear piece. And I think Canadian media as a whole has done a pretty good job of just informing people on this, because every time I wake up, I turn on the news and there is the daily debrief from the World Health Organization. They are not torquing
with CBC showing one story about northern Italy and the shelves getting cleared. It's a fact, it's true.
Totally.
And it does lead to people going, oh my God, is that going to happen here? Suddenly,
but it could.
You go on Amazon and order your baked beans and your tuna to store in your basement, because you're thinking, I want to be prepared. I mean, are we prepared for earthquakes? Probably. People are going to be more prepared for this than they are for earthquakes potentially. But
I would take you back on the baked beans on Amazon. Is there a lot of people that don't cook, haven't cooked, Uber eat out, buy their thing at Whole Foods and blah, 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 and probably couldn't hunker down for 48 hours. Yeah. Food security is something you should think about, and maybe getting some non-perishable food items, and make sure you have a can opener also. If you don't cook, maybe having a few of those things on your shelf isn't a bad idea. Do you need to clear off the shelf at Safeway? No.
Start with your freezer.
I love my freezer. Come on over to my house.
Don't
No, I'm kidding.
But the impact on the economy, you mentioned that with Trump, and I think that's he's to calm down the economy, but it's happening. Simultaneously in Canada, we have another thing happening.
Well, I was just going to say, thank you for the segue, because over we go to the pipeline. 43, at last count, probably higher than that, freighters lined up.
Running their diesel fuel
off the coast
heating systems.
They're now hiding in like little bays around Gulf Islands and like huge freighters loaded with goods. Some of those goods going bad.
Right, food potentially.
Yeah. And it's all due to protests and blockades. And we've spent a lot of time here on UnSpun discussing the ins and outs of the minutia. Today, as we are speaking, the government, the federal government and the provincial government are speaking with the hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en. They're actually meeting right now.
Okay.
And the hope is to continue those conversations and see if they can find a way. But interesting, Jordan Armstrong, reporter and anchor at Global BC, did a very interesting story. And
I saw that. Well, he focused on two of the sort of full-time protesters.
Ivan Drury and Natalie Knight.
Natalie Knight. And one point he said was she's American. I don't know how relevant that is, but she is First Nations from Arizona, I think, or California. Or somewhere.
Yep.
And Ivan, though, I know Ivan through politics. I mean, he is in
everywhere.
City Hall. I don't know how many times he came to City Hall with protest groups. We actually, one time, they took over council, sat in our chairs, kicked us out. Another time, and I'm pretty sure he might have been involved in this, but Gene Swanson was, where they blocked the entrances to City Hall. We couldn't get in, so we had to have, I think we talked about this.
Yeah, you ran down the street.
We were chased down the street like a terrible nightmare version of the Beatles video. And, it was so he's kind of pops up in all kinds of protests. Usually it's related to housing, but now he's mainly focused on this Aboriginal argument and the environment. So, I mean, and they were, and Jordan was chasing him down, and he was asking him questions, and he was being aloof and not evasive
maneuvers,
and playful in his way. I mean, he's a very engaging guy, I must say. I can see how he can motivate people. I've seen his personality. I've seen him in chamber. He's very he's effective in what he's achieving, and he's definitely a key player, I think, in what's going on out there. From an organization point of view, and motivating these people to get out there and protest.
So, in terms of those who are protesting, are we seeing now a shift towards protests that are maybe a different focus from what they initially were? Like, is that what you're seeing here?
Well,
is that what you're saying?
Well, I think that, following Ellis Ross, who talks a lot about, which is, he's really trying to be the voice of the elected governments of First Nations, and talks about, when he was 14 and he started drinking, and he wants to stop that cycle. And to stop that cycle, if you're up north in these remote areas where they don't have access to jobs and the lifestyles that they're used to down here in the south of British Columbia, he's saying this is our solution to several generational problem, caused by, what happened in Canada with, so I think that, except, he's getting a lot of heat for that, and anybody who takes a side on this issue is it's significant. You can watch on Twitter, and I've been kind of cautious because I think it's important to listen to both sides. There's arguments on both sides. But I think it's interesting when you take it from their point of view, and he's saying these are elected councils that made these decisions many years ago to move forward with it.
So interestingly enough, these hereditary chiefs who disagree with the Coastal GasLink pipeline ran for election and did not earn the elected position of an elected chief
in their nations.
Exactly.
So, yeah, and we all know about the poll, 85%, and certain, all of them have agreed, and so I don't know. And so hopefully today they're meeting. That's great, and let's hope that they can get to some kind of resolution. But will that stop the protests across the country? I'm not sure. I think now things are moved into a different direction, and there is a movement happening that is bigger and more complex than what's happening with Wet'suwet'en and what's happening in First Nations in general. I think this is an issue of housing, and it's becoming an issue of the environment. It's becoming, when you look at the Ivan Drury's and all these people who are involved, they are coming at this thing from different directions, and this is their chance to, and then they believe in it, shutting down the economy is the way to solve all their problems. And of course, there are arguments against that.
But it's working in
it's
that,
shutting down the economy.
Because...
And we won't feel the repercussions of this or the virus for a year. It's in a significant level on how it impacts business and how it impacts our economy in a larger sense. So,
an already stressed economy here in southern BC, no doubt. Like, we were already seeing shuttered businesses, and we saw, I don't know if you saw the bit with Karen McSherry of Gourmet Warehouse on with Linda Steele, and I saw it actually on Twitter, and how impassioned Karen, and anybody who knows Karen McSherry and her son who works at Gourmet Warehouse, you don't ever go to Gourmet Warehouse and not see Karen McSherry actually there working. Like, she's not somebody who just owns it. Yeah. She's actually living it, and they're right at Hastings and Clark, and that disruption there has significantly impacted her ability to do business, and she was clearly frustrated and at her wit's end to that sort of mindset. And then people on Twitter, some people on Twitter were like, "That's the last time I'm ever spending $1 there," and I was like, "What? What is that?" And glad to see that a bunch of people came to the defense of Karen, but just that people would be like, "Well, she's some entitled, settler." It's like, she's a businesswoman. Like, this isn't all race related. It's people trying to survive in all walks, all religions, all cultural backgrounds. Like, it's just, for me, watching it's just so intense right now. And we even have in our family a couple of really strong activist, motivated, educated young people who sometimes get caught up in, I'm just going to take this way because it aligns with me more, and will become super extreme this way, as opposed to really focusing on trying to find a way through the standoff, because that's what we have right now. We have an Occupy standoff, situation that won't just go away tomorrow, like the day after on 4/21.
4/20. What? It's not happening because we have marijuana's being legalized. So, we don't have to have the 43 communication staff managing this situation this year, right? Because, marijuana's,
I'm going to go down there and get some balm for my elbow. My tennis elbow. I need some balm.
You don't have to go down there. You can go to many
dispensary.
Order it online.
I could. It could just come right to my house.
So 4/20 is happening, right?
At Sunset Beach.
At Sunset Beach. So that's going to go
How are we here again? I don't even know.
Well, I think this council, and the mayor was very not strong on this last year. We talked about that. He just said, we'll kind of talk about it and there's no plan that was put forward. Immediately following last year, the plan should have been put forward about where is the alternative location. Is it going to be over by Olympic Village on that empty piece of property that the city owns that's just sitting empty right now, where there's supposed to be a school, by the way?
Where Cavalia goes, where Cirque du Soleil goes, where they, there's no big bill handed over at the end to taxpayers.
What about Jericho Park? I mean, there's less housing in Jericho Park. If you're having
where the
in a
Jazz
park,
Fest goes.
you're less challenged with policing. You're not blocking a seawall necessarily like you do downtown.
Yeah.
It's intentionally
disruptive
because it's a protest
Dana
against
loves that.
what again? Against what? What's the protest? Oh, he's actually moved on to mushrooms, I understand.
Yes, he has.
So maybe it'll be the mushroom.
But he was, he's still on it because he loves he loves to dig in and fight. And Jody Emery, same. They anybody who pushes back, again, it's like you're either my way or the highway. Yep. You're either all in 420 Sunset Beach or you're the enemy. And the other side of it is like, how about somewhere else? How about not the jewel of our city?
Or just do it officially, saying we'd like to celebrate marijuana.
Right.
And we're going to have an event, and we're going to make money, and we're going to pay for policing, and we're going to make sure that we keep the sidewalks, accessible. Or it's just like, I don't know.
But remember when
I don't see any solution unless the city gives them a solution. And if they defy that, then they got to not let them do it, as we talked about last year. Yeah. Make it impossible for them to set up.
And that's where I want to go next, because that kind of ties into the protests that we're seeing now, what 420 is like.
Right.
Oppenheimer Park also, it's the seeming
passiveness?
I don't know.
Lack of willingness to enforce the laws and regulations and policies of our country and our city and our province. I mean, I think there is this nature of governance now that you don't enforce. And I'm in my experience when I was in office, a court order to say you have to move along is effective without any challenge at all. They literally will go, oh, okay, yeah, well, thanks. And they might protest a little bit and they'll yell and a few people get arrested. But there's generally, it's fair, it has been peaceful in my experience. So we've had these...
for 420, so let's take it back to 420. Mm-hmm. Making it impossible for them to set up.
You get an injunction saying you can't hold this event on this weekend, and then gives the law enforcement community to be able to use the injunction.
Is that park board then?
It would be park board in this case. But the park board, as we know, are unwilling, the majority are unwilling to enforce anything, and neither is our mayor. So we will have 420 again.
On 420.
On 420 at English Bay. I can't see anybody in our current governance who has control or the majority not making it happen. And it's like, this is not about, I mean, it's indicative of the Oppenheimer 420 and now these pop-up protests across the country. It's just, if you don't deal with it immediately, it just starts to get out of control. And now the Prime Minister is dealing with, I don't know how many locations now, without any understanding of who's in control of these things. Who does he talk to now? Sure, they're having a meeting today up in, with the hereditary chiefs. Will that solve the problem? Well, probably not, because a lot of these protests now are like these organizations and groups that want to protest a whole bunch of things.
And they got things that they're mad about.
Who do you talk to now? Yeah. Who do they meet if they don't stop?
Well, when you get all the way to city council and maybe make your way onto, I don't know, an advisory board, and maybe you're the chair of the advisory board, you'd think we're gonna have a rock solid conversation about what is urgent and what is needed. Like, let's say the LGBT plus advisory committee chair in city council yesterday.
Yeah, there's a bit of a gaff, to say the least.
That is like
Councillor
the understatement.
She's getting a lot of heat from the LGBTQ plus community, where she asked the chair of the LGBTQ plus.
What was your sex assignment at birth?
Yeah, this is.
It's 2020.
I know.
This just in. I mean, you don't do that.
And she did apologize later for it, apparently, but it was definitely like, you sort of think you have the experience. So it's...
Does she not have experience?
Well, you think as an she's being an employer, you can't ask that question as an employer. You can't ask about pregnancy. You can't ask about
what's your religion,
what age you are. There are many, and as city councillor who oversees the advisory committee, it's very similar to an employee-employer relationship. You are restricted by those things, and you have a code of conduct to follow as a councillor. And so she broke the code of conduct, but I apologize, though she's probably covered herself.
Well, I'm glad she apologized.
She obviously
for sure.
felt terrible. It's not, but it was really she's MPA. I was MPA. they're already dealing with the stories about the new board being having
right wing,
and it's just like this is not the right.
So my thing is,
can
I give you my unspun on this?
Sure.
That what frustrates me, because I don't know Colleen Hardwick. I'm sure she's a good person. She's working hard to represent at City Council and trying to enact change in our city. I want to know, beyond the apology, why would you ask that? Like, what's the motivation to ask a question like that of anyone ever? Like, backtracking it is fine, but to actually pose that question, something had to be noodling in the back of your head as to what the next question would be. Like, where's the relevance on that?
Well, yeah, and usually from when I was in council, generally you have 5 minutes or so to ask questions, and so of people speaking. So my goal was to go on some sort of journey with the person to say, set it up, and then take them, you kind of had an idea of where you wanted to go, but you wanted some answers, but you can't ask everything. So you sort of go, okay, I want to go on some journey here with this person to sort of to either get their point out or me to make a point or something. And so she must have in her head been thinking, I'm going on some kind of journey here that will help define what it is I'm trying to explain here, whatever that might be. Right. And so
I'd like the context of that.
Yeah, and I think she should perhaps, it would be good to see if she writes an op-ed or something, or
I'm not mad at it. I'm frustrated by it.
Yeah, it's disappointing. I would say from a leadership point of view, and in this day and age, that's the kind of thing you're surprised to see happen.
I wanted one more thing, just like squeeze it in here. The Cullen inquiry getting underway this past Monday.
Yes.
And you can watch
money laundering.
That's it's the inquiry into money laundering, and already the partisan camps have taken their spots, and I just cannot believe that this isn't a subject matter, something that has hit particularly British Columbia, if not Metro Vancouver, so incredibly, profoundly hard that everybody wouldn't get on the same page just to find out where we screwed up. Because obviously we screwed up because we let this happen all of us. It happened right under our noses, and we didn't identify it. Like, where are the loopholes that need to be closed to make sure that this doesn't ever happen again? And people are like, yeah, we're not going to give you all the documents. And the other side's like, give us all the documents.
People being invested or asked questions and stuff. I think that but the solutions we know are not that complex. It's about tax, about access to your financials, your tax documents,
not being able to
where's the
hide
money
behind
coming
a
from,
number.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think the process is very partisan and political right now. You see David Eby and using this as a tool, and then this thing will run right into the next election. It's a great, wedge issue. It's only kind of not in the top of the news cycle right now because of all the other stuff going on.
We just had it as our sixth story.
Yeah, hopefully Cullen will come back with a really clear report on not necessarily punishing everybody. That's one thing, and I'm sure the NDP would love that. But they were in power. They represented almost half the province.
They raised the ability to gamble at a whole new level.
Yes. So hopefully it'll be focused on solutions. And those solutions actually I think will be mostly federal. A lot of their federal issues that the Prime Minister needs to deal with.
How do we know what the solutions need to be if we don't have all the documents saying what was missed when and how? Like, they need to all go on the table. They just need to go all on the table. It's nuts that it's. Anyways, we're going to continue to watch it. You can actually watch it, stream it live. Full public inquiry.
What a party that must be.
But if you have information, I'm one of those nerds. But if you have information about this, if you worked somewhere and you saw something or someone told you, to turn a blind eye to something, this is your opportunity to actually show up.
I got to admit, though, Super Tuesday this coming week, right?
Yeah.
In the States?
Yeah.
I'm kind of nerding out on all that stuff right now.
Super duper nerd.
Saturday and Tuesday.
Who do you think won in Nevada?
Well, Bernie, right?
Yeah, and then who do you think is
going
to South Carolina?
It's if Biden doesn't, it's over for him.
Right.
It's over for him.
He's surging now again. God. We'll see. Last but certainly not least, my middle this week really was sparked by a conversation I had on CKNW. It was really random. I was on my Facebook page of all things, and I'm scrolling by and I see Corey Hirsch and Kirk McLean, two favorite Canucks alumni, really great guys that I had the opportunity to cover. And Corey had written something of me and Kirk are working on this thing for the BC government. And so I DM'd him and I said, want to come on radio with me tomorrow? And he was like, sure, what do you want to talk about? And I was like, well, whatever you and Kirk are doing, and I've read his op-ed piece in The Athletic called Dark, 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 Dark. Highly recommend that as a read. If you don't get The Athletic, you should, just for that. Read it on your free trial.
Great title, as
it is.
Shakespeare would say in
Yeah.
Shakespeare in Love.
And Corey came on the radio with me, and
I've
been thinking about it ever since. And I just had to write it
And
down.
anybody who has mental health issues or knows somebody, his clarity on his challenge and some of the solutions that he sought is very interesting. So read them, your op-ed or your middle, and listen to there's a link in your article to the actual interview, which is really worth clicking and listening to.
Thank you. He's very heartfelt and honest about his struggles, and it really is specific to men. It's for everybody.
Yeah, and he makes that clear.
But it's like, guys,
I can't solve everything. This is his focus, and it's one of the, as you say, it's one of a group that are unwilling to admit that they're sick, that they need help.
Just that you need help. Just, you're not supposed to suck it up. You're not supposed to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You're actually supposed to talk it through, because you can feel better. And that's what Corey really wants to get across, is he does feel remarkably better. It took him 10 years after his diagnosis to write the
20
piece.
years, he
He's
said.
20 years now.
20 years, the whole space.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But he is fully engaged and literally says, DM me, call me.
I know.
I'll get back to you. Yeah.
Oh, sports fans, just irrelevant. Hey, buddy,
like, hey,
who should I bet on the next hockey game?
Who was the toughest stop you ever made?
Yeah.
I know that's happening. We got to stop now.
Yes.
Bye.
See ya.